Hello and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. I'm Noel, and today I'm joined once again by Miriam Suzanne, co-founder of Oddbird, here to go into some topics relating to her recent talk, Is Sass Dead Yet? Welcome back, Miriam. How's it going?
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. You're always a pleasure to talk to, a wealth of knowledge. You know a lot and are good at presenting it, and it's always a pleasure to dig in and pick your brain a little bit.
Oh, thank you. Always lovely to be here.
To frame this a little bit, I know you've been iterating on a couple of topics that this talk kind of centers around. What's been your goal as you've gone out and in this recent run of talks and stuff you've been giving? What have you been trying to convey?
Yeah, I think for me, the big question is that there's a few of these weird quirks that exist behind the scenes in CSS that are things people run into, I think, all the time. Like when I get questions, the question seems simple, but the answer has to do with something like invalid at computed value time or understanding how the value resolution process actually works with properties in CSS. And it's just the sort of thing that for a long time wasn't really taught, because CSS, you can say background pink and you get a pink background. Like, why do you have to learn value resolution? It's pretty direct, right? But as soon as we start adding in variables, we start to get these problems, except that people avoided a lot of them by only setting variables on the root, and then everything is just inherited and everything works the same way. But as soon as you start to get more complicated than that, value resolution has a lot to say. And it's the process that the browser uses to actually figure out what styles to apply and how to apply them. So I've been trying to figure out ways to teach that. And those problems become even more exposed when we're talking about functions and mixins. CSS Day invited me to talk about functions and mixins, and I presented the basics of how those work and then pivoted into really to be ready for functions and mixins, you have to start learning how value resolution works. So that's been the big overall thrust of these talks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I'm not trying to sound like tired. I think there's something to like, I think like declarative languages in general seem to have this problem maybe, or this thing where that the pattern of user comes in, the language is specific to the domain in which it operates, and it can do so much that it's kind of like, I don't really need to worry about most of what it's doing under the hood because I just do the thing and it works. But then I think it leads to this like lack of understanding of what's going on. Do you feel that there's something unique to CSS, or like a way in which, I don't know, we could be presenting this to devs that aren't in the CSS headspace all the time to make this less painful and scary? What's your kind of framing there?
My answer to the first part of the question doesn't get to the second part. I have less of an answer on like, how do we solve this with devs who aren't thinking about it?
Yeah.
Although I would like your answer. But on the first part, I think there is definitely something special about CSS in having this problem, which is that it has two extremely competing goals right from the start. So like right from the first proposals coming out for how we might style the web. And styles on the web are coming out several years after the web has already started to become popular. And at that point, it's not that the web is unstyled. You can't render text without giving it a color, giving it a font.
Right.
Like there's styles. You need something.
Mm-hmm.
But the styles are only coming from the browsers. Your website looks different in every browser, but the same as every other website in that browser.
Yeah.
The big problem, and the reason there weren't styles at the beginning, is because this is supposed to be a medium that works everywhere. And it says that in the first website. It says this is supposed to be available across all platforms, and that means no control over fonts or colors, because fonts and colors are device specific.
It's information delivery, not visual arrangement of information.
Exactly. So fundamentally, CSS has a problem when it's proposed. And the Cascade sort of solves that problem by basically saying users can override you and browsers can ignore you. And that's how we'll make it work where it works, but disappear where it doesn't work. And we still have a cross-platform thing. So we've got this problem where CSS is trying to handle the entirety of visual presentation and animation and graphic design and typography, like everything you can imagine wanting to do visually.
Yeah, like scaling, size, like some accessibility stuff. Yeah.
Right. You're also dealing with hovers and interactions, and you're trying to do that across all possible devices, which have different interfaces. They've got different languages. This is an absurdly complex problem. Like Figma would never. This is too big of a problem to solve. And CSS is doing it, and doing it, I think, fairly well, considering how difficult that problem is.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's a goal in CSS of this should be simple and approachable. And you can see how those are problematic when you put them together.
Right.
And I think, again, CSS does it pretty well. Like you really can start by just saying, this is the font I want. These are the colors I want. Give me a website.
Yeah.
And building on it from there. But it means that the learning curve, or if you want to really master this thing, there's a steep drop off there where like now you're dealing with some real complexity that the browser's just been handling for you behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because it's a complex problem space. And to make it simple for you to start means the browser's doing a lot. Yeah, I think CSS sort of has this unique problem, maybe more than other languages, but
yeah. And I think it's compounded too, because I agree with your point that I think CSS is doing a good job. I think it does a lot better job now than it used to do.
Sure.
But I think we still need to support a lot of those legacy things. So that also adds a lot of friction, because it's like you can do the air quoting like wrong. Like the old thing that you probably don't really want to be doing. There's probably a better alternative, but the old thing is still around because we still need to support it. So it just limps so long.
And I think a lot of the old things are still useful, just not for like
what they're,
So like floats. Floats are pretty cool. Floats are pretty cool, actually. The only reason we hate them is because we were trying to use them for layout, and they were never meant for layout. That was a hack. But
yeah, there wasn't better alternatives at the time. We didn't have all the stuff we had. Yeah.
There are maybe some cases where it's, we shouldn't have even had that property. That was a mistake.
Yeah. But yeah, it's hard. It's such a huge domain, and it's easy to look back with the knowledge of now and be like, have we've learned all this stuff. But I guess, let's rein this in a little bit. We're gonna go completely off there. I guess, is value resolution like a good starting point here? Do you think that's what we should jump off from?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. I don't think this is a thing that most devs even, unless they're front end first and they have a pretty rigorous training, even boot camp stuff where you're like doing a lot of front end, I don't think most people are touching on the resolution process.
No.
How do you think we should be? What should we keep in mind?
Yeah, I've been working on that because I'm writing a course about it. So I've been really trying to figure out that curriculum. But I think there's interesting things happening at each stage of the process. One of the things that I keep coming back to is it's a program that runs without us. So every website, in order to render, runs through this process, whether or not we attach any CSS.
Oh, okay.
In fact, properties exist on elements, whether we provide a value or not. All of them have a default. And there's something like, depending on how you count, there's something like 650 CSS properties. That's not including the shorthands, because the shorthands really aren't their own properties on elements. Shorthands are a way of setting several, which is one of the steps in the value resolution process. Is like one of the first steps is you've got to parse it, and you've got to split apart the shorthands into their longhands.
Yeah. Stuff
like that. And so understanding that happens first, and that's before the cascade. And so after the shorthand splits, then each of those longhands will cascade to resolve conflicts. Like, where do things happen? Another sort of problem that people run into is a confusion about the timing of cascading and inheritance, and understanding that like the cascade is narrowing us down when we have multiple values, and inheritance is filling in when we're missing a value. And they happen in that order. So first things cascade, and then if there's still an empty spot, things inherit into that.
Mm-hmm. And that means, think of those as like up and down. Is that your mental model? Or
that's an interesting way to think of it. Like, yeah, I think of it as a filtering and then an expanding, or a filtering and then a filling in. But yeah, and then some of the weird complexities we get into is the new stuff will have to so first we have what's literally called filtering in the value resolution process, which is a parsing step.
Yeah.
Things split apart and we get rid of anything that's not relevant. And that's often where we get rid of things that are like the wrong type. If you say you say margin teal is a color, not length. So it doesn't work in margin. CSS is strictly typed. And so like you can only use colors some places and you can only use length some places. So we can get rid of some stuff there that we're like, oh, this doesn't make sense. The types are wrong. So we're throwing an error but silently and getting rid of it. And then we get to cascading, which is taking where we've got conflicts and trying to get ourselves down to a single value for each property. But some of them are empty because we're not going in and setting 650 properties. Like that would be wild.
I was surprised when you threw that number up. My guess would have been like, I don't know, 250 or something. It's like, I know I'm going to guess low, so I'm already padding it. And even then I'd guess 250. Like,
but I think the point too, when I look at it, is I haven't even learned all of those. And I don't need to.
Most people don't. Right? There's no way. Yeah.
And I think some people would say, then is CSS a bloated mess? And to me, I'm like, no, I'm not doing animation. Like Josh Como is doing animation. I think it's great that those properties exist, even though I'm not using them on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Like we don't all have to use every word in the dictionary. Those words are still useful.
Exactly. Yeah. Given domains and given contexts and all these things, it's it's nice to have. I need this one for this thing. I'll use it here.
Yeah. And we're working for different companies. We're solving different problems.
Yeah.
It's great that we have this language that is trying to attack the whole problem space. So yeah, we're not writing 650 properties on every element. And that's how the browser thinks of it. The browser is going through the DOM and looking at every single element and then saying, I need one value for every property on this element. There's 650 properties. I have to go find all the styles that might apply. So that's the filtering. Find all the styles that might apply. And then I have to get down to a single value. So if I've got multiple values on any of those properties, I have to cascade them to find a winner. So the cascade is resolving conflicts. And then I have to fill in any that are missing. And some properties will inherit to do that. And it's generally the text-based ones where it wouldn't make sense. If you put a span inside of a paragraph and it changes font by default, that's bad, right? And if it changes color by default, that's bad. So those have to inherit. But you wouldn't want to inherit box things. You wouldn't want to inherit a border.
Margins and borders and stuff like that.
Yeah. Because
that'd be weird. That'd be weird.
So basically you can think of it as if I inserted a span here, what would it be weird if it did appear? And what would be weird if it didn't appear? And so those are the properties that inherit or don't inherit for the most part.
I'm not really conscious of which of these properties will inherit and which won't. I think it's like a muscle memory I've learned just through having done it. But I don't think I've ever gone in and really inspected it, thought about what does and what doesn't. Do you think that may in particular be like a pain point that is a thing that like ends up making this so difficult? Or do you think that is like the defaults are so good that most people's experience is what I'm describing, where and like it doesn't really hurt me most of the time?
I think the defaults are so good it doesn't hurt you most of the time. And like I also don't explicitly think about which things are going to inherit and which aren't most of the time. But I think it's useful to understand, some things will and some things won't. And I need to think about them slightly different. Like when I run into problems, I need to understand that as a place to look.
Right.
And so that's what I want out of teaching value resolution, is not like you have to think through the value resolution every time you write a property. And you have to know which ones behave in which ways. It's more like you should understand that these are the steps and that this program is running. And I think of it like we're providing config, right? There's this program that runs and it has its default config. And we can go in and we can adjust the config. And that's all we can do.
Yeah.
We can't change how the program runs. The program's already written. It's a browser engine. It runs. It applies these properties to elements. And in fact, like at the point where it's rendering the page, all of our code has already been cascaded and inherited. And now the browser looks at how those properties relate to each other and tries to figure out how should these interact. And there's lots of weird interactions there, and there's timings between them. If you apply a rotation and a transform, or a translation, a movement you apply rotate and translate, the order of those matters. If you rotate first and then translate, you're moving a different direction than if you translate.
Yeah, you're changing your vector.
And if you translate and then rotate, you're doing something else. And if we're doing all of that inside of the transform property, we can set up the order of our functions. But we now have these individual properties, translate, rotate, and scale. And scale also impacts the other ones, because do you move twice as far if you've scaled first?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So with the properties, we don't define the order of properties. Properties are applied the way the browser applies properties. That is defined outside of us. That's part of the program that's running. And we're only applying config. So we can learn things like it does it in the order where they don't impact each other. It does the translation first so that the rotation and scale don't impact it. And there's a lot of other things like that where one property happens before another, and we can just run into those edge cases. And most of the time we don't have to think about it because the default's pretty clever. Yeah, but understanding that we don't control the program, we only provide config.
Yeah.
We only provide new values for these properties, and then the program runs applying those values. I think that's a useful, sort of separation, mental separation.
Yeah.
That doesn't really change most of how I write CSS day to day, but it changes how I understand debugging CSS and what I do when I run into problems.
No, yeah. I like that a lot. I feel like I can tell you've thought about this a lot, because not just having done it, but thought about how to convey that to other people to get them kind of thinking about this. Because I think you're right with engineers that are, or whatever, people writing CSS that are doing this for the first time or exploring, if they were presented with it in this mode where it's okay, everything has all of these like variables, all these properties that can be set. And now you have an engine with which you can set them.
Yes,
like
exactly.
That's like, okay, then I think that leads to this kind of, you're just thinking about it differently than I'm just writing this declarative magic and it's like blasting colors and spacing onto the page in a magical way I don't totally understand. Yeah. So that's very cool.
Yeah. And then this talk was getting into the, like, where are the weird edge cases? Because there's a thing with like variables. Okay, you're allowed to put anything inside of a custom property. So we can say, let's just name the property Miriam. We've got -- Miriam, and Miriam is allowed to be teal. So we can put a color in there. That's fine. And it's also legal syntax to say that the margin is the custom property Miriam. Both of those are legal, right? So at that point, when we run the parser and we can also say that Miriam is 3 pixels.
Okay. Yeah,
and we can say that somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they apply to the same element. So we're not going to know which one of those applies until we run the cascade. But we're trying to filter at the beginning based on type. So then we've got this problem where the browser says, okay, I don't know whether Miriam is a color, in which case we should discard this, or a length, in which we keep it.
I need to execute to see what happens here. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this problem where as soon as we start using variables, we lose the type checking. And then we run into this, what is called invalid computed value time, where we get to the end of the process and find out that Miriam was teal and that we can't apply teal to the margin. And we've already discarded everything else in the cascade.
Yeah, we can't fall back to whatever we should be inheriting or whatever it may be because we've already set it to this other value.
So now we have to drop back to the initial value, which is just a random thing.
Yeah, for depending on the property, who knows?
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for margin, that's going to be 0. For color, that's going to be canvas text. Yeah. There's all these different initial values, and we just fall back to one of them, and then we get confused because we're like, "But why don't?" Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't actually
the mental model. Yeah.
Right. And the fallback in a variable doesn't work at that point. The fallback is something that we only get if the custom property is not set. We don't get it if the custom property is set but wrong.
Error, type error. Yeah.
So this is a common error that people run into and have trouble debugging. But if we understand how the process is working and that there is such a thing as invalid at computed value time, and that we're going to have it more and more. Mixins and functions both trigger invalid at computed value time behavior anywhere they're used, the same way that variables trigger it anywhere they're used. And so more and more of our code is getting this sort of late validation that's going to mess us up. And we better have an eye for it.
Yeah, because it's inherently happening at compute time. Like the execution time is when the error occurs versus this pre-building of the tree compilation step that we're doing.
And so it's harder to recover from it.
Yeah. So I guess, this feels like one of those problems where it's just going to be a little bit tricky. Do you feel like, is there, how to frame this? Is this one of those things where you need an understanding of this before you're really using functions, mixins, stuff like that? Is this kind of the cost of these new tools?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's the same way that people have been using variables without understanding it. You can do it just fine. I think you'll be able to just pick it up and play with it. The question is, and having been around the web for a while, we see this over and over where devs are doing pretty well with CSS and then they run into a thing and they just add more code. And it's the opposite of what works in CSS. CSS is setting constraints. So say you've got a box and you set that it has a constraint that it has to be, 10 pixels from the edge. You also set a constraint that it has to be 100% wide. And you also set a constraint that it has to be 100% from the other edge or something, right? You can set up constraints that conflict.
That don't make sense. Like they're inherently impossible. Yeah.
They're inherently impossible. And so the browser has to do something with those too. And that's a different sort of problem solving that it's doing in the rendering process where it gets to it and says, oh, these values don't actually add up. I have to prioritize some over others. That's where we run into things like text just honking right out of the box with the CSS is awesome meme or whatever. We set too many constraints, a large font, inability to break words, and a small box. That's on us, right? And the browser just has to do something. So there's a lot of problems that come up there. And when we just throw more constraints at it, if we think of every property as a constraint we're throwing at the browser, throwing more constraints at that problem makes it worse. It doesn't make it better. And this is also what LLMs do, is they throw more properties out.
I was about to ask. I feel like LLMs are bad at exercises in minimalism. Like they're terrible at it. Yeah.
Right. So we run into some problem that we don't understand. We throw more constraints at it. Then maybe ask a chatbot and it throws more constraints at it. And here we are digging our hole deeper.
Yeah, and maybe it works specific. It's one of those, I feel like when I'm in this pit, I fix my specific problem and then I move something. It's I've broken everything else.
Yes. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think it becomes a problem. And I don't know, to me, there's a little bit of a question of how do you convince authors that you need to learn the thing that's going to get you out of that hole. It's not the thing that you're going to need when you're trying to set the color. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine applying most mixins. You're going to be fine applying most functions. You're going to be fine using variables. But when you run into these problems, if you don't understand the mental model, you're going to dig your hole deeper when you need to be finding your way out. And I hope we can help with that. And I hope authors are interested in that.
Yeah. So I guess, again, the title of the talk is Sass dead yet? Do you think, I guess we can dig into why that specifically, but I think, are there tools in general?
What are we talking about?
Yeah. Are there tools that make this worse and tools that make this better? Is there frameworks or mental projections that people are using through some abstraction that make this more or less a problem that you've really observed? Or do you think it's that there's some...
In some ways, to me, it's the tools that claim to hide the problem from you are the most dangerous to me. And maybe I'll throw LLMs. You don't need to know it. Somebody else will fix it for you. Anything that's based on abstinence-only approaches to CSS. Never use importance. Never use multiple selectors. Never do this. Never do that. where you're trying to just always avoid the problems, I find those, I don't know, maybe they're helping somebody avoid the problem for a while, but like it means you think you can sidestep it. And I don't believe you can sidestep it. Like, I think this is another point of the program running without us is cascade happens. You are not avoiding the cascade. Cascade is happening. And it's happening with user styles and with browser styles and with anything that we do right, whether we did it through Tailwind or not, whether we used BEM-shaped selectors or not. The cascade is happening, and we have to deal with it. And just pretending it isn't there. Yeah. So to me, that's less about the tools and more about the mental model that the tools encourage, which is a yes, you can avoid it model. Yes, you never have to learn this. I prefer tools that allow me to access the language. I'll talk about cascade layers. And for me, in my work, cascade layers have made specificity conflicts irrelevant. I don't need BEM selectors. What are we talking about? What are we doing here? Like, this is a problem of 10 years ago. Let's just write good CSS again. But then I'll give a talk on cascade layers and somebody will say, I'm using this tool that doesn't support that yet. What do I do? And I'm like, I don't know. Get a different tool. Like, why isn't your tool? So I like tools more like Sass. Try to stay out of the way and try to say, yeah, if I don't understand something, I'm just going to let you do it because it's probably new CSS. That should probably be allowed.
Great. Yeah. I think Sass kind of lives into the whole, its mantra where it's like an extension. Like, it doesn't feel like there's kind of magic going on most of the time.
And there were maybe some early mistakes where Sass has an @if, and that means that if CSS creates an @if, there's going to be a lot of problems. But yeah, early syntax mistakes, but mostly has tried to stay out of the way.
Yeah, you mentioned Tailwind as well. Do you feel Tailwind is over obfuscating some of this stuff a little bit? I feel like that's the obvious one.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things. Tailwind is multiple tools at once.
That's true. People use it for very different things. Like, when I'm reaching for it, I'm just like, I just want this to look good enough out of the box, and I'm not. It's like
you're using it like a bootstrap
exactly.
or whatever, or a foundation or something as a pre-built design system. And I get why people want pre-built design systems. I get tired of every website looking like the same pre-built design system, but
if you're building internal tools or something for yourself, I'm just like, I just want to get buttons on the page that don't look terrible and do the thing. It's like,
also, your job is not to make me happy, so go for it. Yeah, I get that. I think using it as a way to avoid learning the language is going to get you caught. You're going to get trapped because it's a leaky abstraction. You still have to learn the language. It still is cascading. It still is inheriting. You have to learn the flex model and the grid model and the reason that margins don't apply to inline boxes or width doesn't apply to an inline box, right? All of that stuff still affects you. So if you're approaching it as a way of sidestepping the language, you're just gonna run into problems you don't understand. So yeah, I don't think it solves the problem that they sometimes sell, which is the best practices don't actually work. We're gonna solve it for you. And there's just not a tool that's gonna solve it for you. If you want the garden not to have weeds, you have to weed the garden. There's no magic solution here.
I guess maybe to answer this kind of is Sass dead yet question before I have some more kind of line I want to explore. But it sounds like you're saying no, if you have specific use cases, you think there's still some utility there, kind of depending on main.
Part of what I point out is that each of these features that we bring over from Sass and other preprocessors, they change when they move into a declarative language because these preprocessors are all imperative. So you're writing the program, and that's different from the program running without you. And so variables work differently, mixins work slightly differently, functions work differently. And so if you have the use cases that you can handle on the server, I think of it like making JavaScript better in the browser didn't replace Node. There's still reasons to do things on the server. even if you've got the same functionality both places. If you can not make the browser deal with it, don't make the browser deal with it. But if you need that sort of dynamic rendering, give it to the browser. The browser can do that. So in my mind, they solve different problems. And if the problem that you have is solved better in the browser, yeah, Sass is dead for you. Get rid of it. Like getting rid of tools in your stack, excellent. But if you still have server-side style problems, I think especially with design systems, that's where I mostly feel like I still pick it up. It can do a lot of giving me my colors or whatever. And then I can set variables. I can set CSS variables from those and use them in dynamic ways. But it can handle a higher level tooling problem if I need.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I agree with the JavaScript client-side no juxtaposition there. But it largely. But it does feel a little different because it's like, there are some things where we need to compute this in a server because there's, for whatever reason, versus the Sass things that we're still like spitting out the thing for the browser to do the thing, like to render however we want. So I guess that's true. Yeah, there's other use cases probably that are not just styling.
I think one of them is that because CSS doesn't have control flow, isn't an imperative language, right? We're never going to get loops. Like maybe we'll get something where we can do like enough sibling index stuff to get to feel like we've achieved something loop-like, but we're never going to get loops. Okay, if I have to loop over something, that's a Sass problem. But I also think of it a little bit the other way around, where if I don't have to make the browser do this, then let's just solve it on the server and not make the browser do it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But that's okay, if I haven't set up Sass already and it's a small problem, sure, I'll just pass it off to the browser. I'm not going to set up Sass for it. But if I've got a lot of these situations, I'm dealing with a big design system, I've got a lot of logic happening that I don't have to make the browser deal with because I get a static answer and that static answer is fine. I'll just do it on the server so I'm not passing extra logic up to the browser.
Yeah, there's the decision tree is complex and there's like enough, like in whatever that may be, and there's enough possible end states where it's just I can't afford.
Complex but not dynamic. Like what the browser can handle is this has to change depending on things related to the client side.
Yeah, dark mode, light mode.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That Sass can't handle. So if it's that sort of thing, yeah, give it to the browser. But if it's the sort of thing where, I'm just, generating one color from another in a pretty static way as part of my design system, browsers don't need to know about that.
Yeah, exactly. Or there's some kind of variable state that's easier. I don't want to do all this stuff if it's server controlled anyway. Yeah, that makes sense. But I think that's probably a good way to think about it. A good way to think about it as well is just like they're solving different problems now. I think probably more so than they were historically. It feels like Sass was doing more of the client side kind of smoothing, or now it's more we'll do the computational server stuff.
Yeah. Computers didn't kill books, but they sure changed what books had to accomplish in the world. I think it's that. And I think it does mean, maybe for you can get rid of Sass. And if that's true, that's great. I have a little bit of a problem with people being so excited to get rid of an old tool that they just end up picking up a new one that does it slightly worse. And I see people like basically rewriting parts of Sass in JavaScript or something. And I'm like, okay, now look, there's already a tool that does that pretty well across an ecosystem where you bring somebody new onto the team, they probably already know how to do it. And you just rewrote it in a way that they don't know how to do. And now you've made your onboarding costs higher, your maintenance costs higher. I don't know what we're doing at that point. This problem is solved. Just go use a tool that solves it. You'll be fine.
Yeah, totally. Do you think this circles back a little bit nicely? Do you think now that we're getting functions and mix-ins and this kind of stuff, because it feels like a lot of those problems are also in that domain as well. Like one could reach for those kinds of those tools too. That feels less bad because we're using a thing that's part of the language, but it still introduces this problem we were talking about before of what is known at compute time versus what's not. How do you make those kinds of decisions? Like when does it feel reasonable to reach for a function versus and maybe we should be doing this on the server?
Well, if you've got to do complex calculations with CSS variables, Sass can't do them for you. Like Sass can spit out the Sass could spit out the calc function, so it could simplify the syntax for you. So basically, those are going to be about like, how much am I sending over the wire? Because they basically let you say, here's a chunk that's going to be reused a lot. I'm only going to send it over the wire once, and then let the browser put it into all the places it's needed. So they're going to be slightly different because a function in CSS can have media queries inside of it. And that feels wild, right?
Yeah,
like you can
responding to the client state in real time is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine being able to, inside of the margin property, put a media query? That's what you can do with a CSS function. And you can't do that with a Sass function. So they're going to have these places where they do not overlap. And similarly, you can do loops in a Sass function, and you won't be able to do loops in a CSS function. So there will be parts of the Venn diagram that don't overlap. But then the parts in the middle, I don't know, it's your call. If they can both do it, if you've already got Sass set up, maybe lean on Sass so you're not making extra work for the browser. Or if you're saving a lot down the wire by changing it to CSS, great. But yeah.
I imagine like performance implications are probably not too bad either way.
Yeah.
And like CSS functions, I feel like are probably pretty fast unless you're doing some really weird stuff.
And part of the thing when you talk about browser performance, there's this weird cycle that happens where like somebody will find a bug in browser performance. And that's how browsers think of it. Like when you find something that performs badly, they think of it as a bug and they fix it as quick as they can. So somebody will find a bug, they'll write an article about it, and then everybody will be like, never do that, it's bad for performance. And the browsers are like, we fixed that 2 weeks later. Like, it's not, we don't have to, just file a bug. Don't write the article, just file the bug. We'll fix it. And then everybody can move on and we can stop like trying to remember all of the, there's still lots of rules about which selectors perform faster than which selectors. And most of it is 10 years old. And you're like, no, stop worrying about selector performance.
Yeah, that's use like whatever works. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the least of your problems in the browser. They are optimizing that just as so well.
Yeah. Cool. I guess, again, we've covered a lot here. Is there anything in particular that's on your wish list for CSS that you think could make it even better at chipping away at some of these decision points of like, should I be using Sass like function? Like, what's your CSS wish list?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of issues that sort of need loop-like solutions or indexing solutions.
Give me an example, just so I have
I think they really become clear in animations. I think there's other places where they're useful. But like in an animation where you're animating a bunch of stuff in and you want each one delayed slightly from the previous one, or you want them staggered. And that's a place where sibling index, which is a new function, probably solves it. Because you take your delay times your sibling index.
Yeah, how far off the base are you?
That's the sort of thing that you would have to do in a loop. And I'm really interested in looking at other places. And I think the one that's really hard is when you want selectors that need to be based on a loop. I guess that's where you have nth child, right? So, and we actually now, for a while, we've had nth of type, not the full nth child where you say 2n of a selector. And that's what nth of type is a shorthand for, but now you can put any selector in there and it's pretty powerful. So we're getting these things that are addressing the loop problems. I'd be curious how close we are to like how many of the loop problems can we solve?
Yeah, it's hard too because it feels like it's okay. We've solved everything that's indexed based offsetting. Or if all I'd be doing was looping and then adding my index to a thing, like whatever that is, that feels like those. And maybe that's all we should be, like all we want CSS in charge of. I don't know. Like it's hard.
Another problem that there's proposed solutions for that I'm excited about is we haven't had typecasting. So we've had this problem where like you can set up a counter, but you can't use that counter for anything other than creating a marker on a list, right? That's about all you can do with it. But what if you could just use that as a number and you could use that as your index? And so we're starting to get some typecasting functions that will like let you say, parse this string as a number, which I think will be pretty powerful. but in the weeds. That's in the weeds.
That's down there.
And grid lanes are going to be much more on the front lines for people.
Yeah, much more utility versus these little things. There's 10 developers and are like, yes, this fixes my problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think we need both ends of that sometimes. We got to have the ways to solve the weird little problems. And we also have to have sort of high level. It's interesting to me that CSS has both things like now typecasting and also things like text wrap pretty.
Yeah.
What is pretty?
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Look good.
Does some things.
Mm-hmm,
yeah, exactly. And I think both ends of that are useful.
Yep. Yeah, it's back to the very first point we were speaking to of this thing is doing so many different things for so many people. It's like the problem space is daunting. The way it's been used now is daunting. It's a huge thing. But again, I think it's better now. I think there's like a kind of a mechanics problem, a little bit of figuring out how to get people to think about these things and not feel overwhelmed. But again, I feel your work has been very good. Every time we talk, I feel like I walk away and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel like I've got a better understanding of this now just from talking to Miriam for an hour.
Yeah. And I feel like the main takeaways that I want people to have are like, yeah, the program runs without us. There's all these properties. We get to set some of them. And when we're running into a problem, we maybe want to look at how the program works, not at what we did. But also, we're probably going to solve the problem better by removing things rather than adding things. Start by removing things. Think through exactly what constraints you want. Are you really concerned about the width, or are you concerned about how it aligns with something? Can we define the alignment instead of the width? Like, how do we express exactly what constraint we're looking for? If you've ever used CAD programs, they visualize this in an interesting way, but most people haven't used CAD programs, so I don't know that it's a great metaphor. But yeah, you want to minimize your constraints. So that's my debugging advice. Learn the program and remove things instead of adding things.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. I feel like that's a great note to end on. Is there anything else, or is that your
That's it.
That's your closing statement? Cool.
That's my closing statement.
I appreciate it. Nice. Thank you for coming and chatting with me, Miriam. Again, I feel like I get so much out of these talks that it's always a pleasure. So
it's always lovely chatting with you. So thank you.
Of course.